Could you
So,
introduce yourself?
uh, good afternoon for all. It's a pleasure for me to be here at DapperCon representing Mottu companies. My name is Alexandre Bencz, and I'm a tech lead here at the Mottu in the part of the delivery systems. And, and well, I don't have too much to say about how big for me it's the pleasure to be here representing all the stuff that we did here with Dapper. It's an enormous pleasure.
Awesome. Could we have our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves? Kendall, you can go ahead and get started.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kendall Roden. I'm one of the product managers for Azure Container Apps. I've been at Microsoft for 6 years, so before joining the Container Apps team, I was a cloud native global black belt and worked with customers on Dapper.
Awesome. Hi there, I'm Karl Wehden. I'm the product director for accelerated discovery at IBM Research. I've been doing that for about almost a year. Before that, I was working solely on quantum runtime services on the quantum hardware. And for 5 years before that, I was actually the product manager for Akka, which is where I met Mark.
Hi, oh, am I on?
Yeah.
Hi for all.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Josh Carlisle.
I can hear.
Unfortunately, I can't say anything about quantum. I wish I could. But I am a principal architect at Zscaler. And it's worth also mentioning that I'm a Microsoft MVP on Azure on the community side.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so first question for the panel. Sorry, you're going to look at me on the side. But I want to know, for each one of you, you guys have a completely different kind of pathway to Dapper. I would like to ask each of you, why are you using Dapper? What made you decide on that? And kind of explain a bit about how you use Dapper in your applications. Just like the short story version. I'll go ahead and start with Kendall.
Okay, that seems appropriate. I'll kick it off. So as I mentioned, right, my use of Dapper is a little bit different than probably the other panelists. So a lot of them will have probably deeper experience in setting up these distributed applications. But ultimately, I think, as our talk surmised, we really, and even before that, right, Alice and I actually used to work together helping customers to instrument distributed applications, even just entry point into containers and distributed application, like the journey, right? And Dapper was always one of the first conversations that we would have. And it's because ultimately we want to make developers more productive. And we found that as customers are breaking down these applications, obviously into distributed systems, they're now introduced to a lot of things that they didn't have to worry about before when they were instrumenting monolithic code, right? They now have out-of-process calls, they have network latency introduced. And so I think ultimately just having a solution that enabled them to solve some of those problems. We also saw that there was a lot of customers who were basically building their own developer platforms because their developers couldn't write and consume these kind of practices and patterns. And so rather than basically telling them, hey, yeah, you as an infrastructure provisioning team or SRE team should basically be responsible for building your own developer tooling, it was a lot easier to say, hey, let's take a look at Dapper and just start the conversation early on and see if it's flexible enough. And for most customers, it really did meet a lot of their needs. And I would say even from even within container apps or when you're thinking about AKS, a lot of customers, whether or not every customer are thinking multi-cloud, right? How do we scale this across cloud providers? And so I think that ability to do the plug and play and not have development teams focused on each particular cloud provider, but rather on the business logic was super compelling, at least in a lot of the conversations we had with architects. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Same answer. Same question for you.
Yeah, so I first ran into Dapper when I was trying to build something very similar, to be honest. I was working on turning Akka from a JVM captured framework for distributed state into something interesting, ran into gRPC, ran into the sidecar pattern, and then summarily ran into Yaron running around KubeCon 3 years ago with this new idea he had, which was basically the same. So we got together with these guys in Redmond and did a little hackathon on using some advanced distributed state functions, CRDTs, a couple of these other patterns that looked interesting as potential extensions to this story. And eventually, Yaron kind of chuckled for a while. We put this prototype together and it's like, I don't know if I need the rest of my stuff to do this. I think I need to think more seriously about how that worked. So it was really neat to A, see that kind of transition in pattern, and B, it was an opportunity to do exactly that. And all the problems that I needed to solve, like key rotation, circuit breakers, all this stuff that I had to port from Lagom and a bunch of the other frameworks that I had in my quiver, were already there. So it made sense. So when I needed to pick up a framework to do this type of thing, there wasn't really much choice in my head as to what I was planning to use, and it was definitely Dapper, and that's kind of why I'm here today.
Oh, you're not audible. Here.
That's okay. Can you hear me? Nope. Okay, we'll share. Oh, you could? Okay, maybe I just need to move it a lot closer.
Speak into the button.
Okay, there we go. I actually got first introduced to Dapper, like a lot of folks, at Microsoft Ignite, I think in 2019. I actually didn't get a chance to actually use it until more recently. Here at Zscaler, we started building a new SaaS platform, right? And so this is one of those rare greenfield opportunities, right, to build something new from ground up. And like most greenfield opportunities, you have a lot of decisions to make, a lot of things you need to take care of. And we quickly found out that a lot of those decisions and things we needed to do distracted us from what we were trying to accomplish, right? It distracted us from writing our business code because we were so busy. Am I coming in and out a little bit? Yeah. Okay, maybe I'll just do. So more recent. I think the cosmos is saying I shouldn't talk.
No, you fight through it, man. You can do it.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay. Thank
The
you.
in-person mute button, alive and well.
Did everybody catch that? Okay. Just kidding. So as I was saying, with a lot of greenfield development, you have a lot of cross-cutting concerns that you have to take care of, right? And there are so many basic concerns that they can become a big distraction from you trying to actually accomplish what you're trying to do on the business side. And we found that out in a hard way, like most teams do. And so more recently, we have been looking to Dapper to kind of help solve that problem for us, to help help us focus, right, on the core business and let Dapper take care of a lot of those cross-cutting concerns for us. The second aspect of it that's probably important to mention as well is it's very typical to make decisions with incomplete data, right? Sometimes you can call those bad decisions, and sometimes they are. But in reality, you often have to make decisions with incomplete data. That could be anything from choosing what data source to use, what messaging platform, and the list goes on and on and on, visibility, whatever it may be. One of the things that we find very attractive about Dapper is it helps insulate us from some of those decisions. It helps give us flexibility so that if we need to, at a later time, to pivot, that we don't need to pivot our entire platform, right? That onboarding, for example, a new messaging platform by being able to use the same API, but a different messaging platform that aligns with a specific use case that our team needs. So we're looking to both reduce the friction for our developers, allow them to focus on the business, and also buy us some flexibility to insulate us from some of those decisions to help us pivot and kind of respond to the changing needs of the platform.
Hey, Alexander.
Hi.
I sense a product opportunity here.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Can I answer now? Great. Okay. Okay. Well, when I found Dapper, we are looking for some actor systems, and we saw Akka, Protoactor, and the other tools. And when I see Dapper, they encapsulate all that we need, like PubSub, actors, virtual actors in this case, and service mesh, and the ability to maximize the speed to create a new service. We migrated a project called Gestão Pedidos. It was a large piece of code with maybe 1 year of code. We started it in the last year, and they just grow with all the data in memory, everything in memories, and handle all the requests from delivery boys, and handle the order state machine. In that project, it was a really big problem because we needed to deal with a lot of jobs running internally of this project, and this project rises up in a point that we are not able to change it or make it more changes in this project. It's really hard, really complex, really dense project to work. So we started to look a way to migrate all that project to a new system in microservices that we can put new features, resolve bugs more easily. And studying all this project, we saw that we need an actor system for representing an order, a delivery boy, a marketplace, and the other parts of the project. And I did a small test. It's not a so small test, but I just implemented a small delivery system, and we did a lot of stress testings, and we put more pods, down pods. We saw how the Dapper handles with these changes in the Kubernetes, and we saw that it's perfect for us. We can build services really fast with a really small time spent in learning, because they gave for us the SDK for .NET, Node.js, and Python, Java, and we rewrote all this project in a series of microservices in about 1 month, a month and a half. So the biggest part that we saw on Dapper is that we can just bring a simple idea, a complex idea, and make it simple without need to worry about the harder nodes, peripheral parts of the system like RabbitMQ, Kafka, state stores, all that stuff. You just plug in and use. It's, for us, perfect to speed up all the development.
It's static?
Anyway, I'm actually pretty loud on my own, so I'm going to just turn it off to you. So my next question is just going to be on, so now that we've talked about all the good parts of what brought you to Dapper, I want to get to the nitty-gritty. So I want to understand what have been some of your technical challenges in actually getting on your road to actually adopting Dapper as part of your application. So we don't pick on you all the time. I will go with Karl this time, and then we'll finish with you.
Okay, my mic works. Yeah, awesome. So there's a couple things I think that's interesting for us. You know, honestly, I have to do some mental separation because we're already using Conductor, so things have been interesting from that perspective too. But at least from my perspective, there is a little bit of what I would call, systemic load that you need to bring on when you onboard a team to Dapper where this is interesting, and that's to move past the idea that it's your job to re-implement some boilerplate. So there's often a tendency to want to work within Dapper and rebuild parts of Dapper on teams, in my experience. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's a part of the learning process in many of these situations. And in these cases, I think it would be fun to have a couple more practical examples of, here's when you're doing the wrong thing and how that could flow as part of that story, which is interesting. For the most part, it's been really good. But, I was thinking when you were talking earlier, one of the real important things to remember is that, freedom can constrain, and really constraints can set you free, but you need to know where they are. What is the boundary and elements of what you're supposed to be responsible for, and what can you trust Dapper to do as part of that view? And that's been part of it. Observability, honestly, was a really primary concern early on. Like, how do I know that all these pieces are working together well? There's good options to work with that today, so that's good from that perspective. But that's really been part of the focal point. Additionally, the freedom that you experience, right, which is what state store is appropriate, when should you be looking at this, what are some common integration points with external services, a couple of these other decisions. We've been lucky to be able to go back and ask the experts for this kind of stuff, but if I had to, humbly offer some feedback, it would be more contextual explanation of how to operate within the ecosystem, both inside and outside the guardrails from an example perspective. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Awesome. Same question.
So I would echo the number one challenge I think we've had is not the technology, it's the human side. I think you mentioned it in the platform side. You have to advocate for it, right? Because to a certain extent, the engineering teams, the architects, you have to win them over because they have to see value in it because they're losing some control. And the last thing an engineer wants to do is lose control, right? And every good engineer thinks they can do it better. And that's usually a good thing, but it can be an efficiency problem. So don't discount the human aspect of onboarding teams to help them understand the value, help them understand. And the way we approach it to kind of counteract that a little bit is saying, and you alluded to this a little bit, all that boring boilerplate stuff that everybody, how many people here have written an RBAC platform or a user login or something or a login over and over and over again, right? The sell here for those teams is that you get to actually work on both the stuff that's more exciting, more interesting, and sometimes the stuff that you're actually being measured against. You're not being measured against how awesome your Kubernetes environment is running, right? Or how awesome your logging library is, right? Customers don't care about that, right? They care about the features and functionality. So it allows you to, at the end of the day, have better success, measurable success, right? So that's kind of the path that we have taken and that we continue to take, and you can't stop doing it if you want to have some growth. But in practical terms, I think there is and continues to be, and this is where the community is great, the last mile issue, right? Like, I'm 99% there, but there's a setting that I didn't quite understand, right? For us, it ran into, we do Kafka a lot. We process enormous amounts of data through Kafka. And it's great when everything's in a Dapperized application, but it took us a little while to figure out the raw payload kind of thing, right? And none of these were deal breakers. None of these caused us problems. The community totally stepped up. I think someone actually even updated the docs within a few days, and it was just like it kind of fixed itself. But I think there's still a little bit of that last little bit where I think Amit kind of mentioned that a little bit, saying if it was just documented a little bit more. And so maybe that's my ask of probably everybody here and maybe folks listening in is contribute to the docs. You'll save some engineer an afternoon or a whole
That's
day.
everyone's favorite thing,
And
of course.
a few curses here and there, right? But like I said, it's that last little mile can be a little bit challenging at times, especially for some of the components that maybe aren't as popular as other components. But if we all kind of work together, we can solve that problem. And it's not a problem that'll be around forever, but that's probably one of the challenges we've had.
Nice.
Right.
Our question for you is, what have been your biggest technical challenges when you were adopting Dapper?
When we start to migrate all this project, we faced some problems, not with the Dapper itself, but how to use it in the right way. We did some mistakes here in the actor configurations. Arthur helped us a lot with fixing these small problems that we did in the code. The biggest technical challenge that we got with Dapper itself, it was when we needed to upgrade the Dapper on the cluster. The guy that was working on the Kubernetes here at Mottu, they got fired, and we stayed for about 1 month without anyone here that has a big acknowledgement in Kubernetes. So one of the guys here in the delivery staff just learned how to do and did some tests, and we just migrated the version from Dapper 1.63 that we started to 1.83. And that was the biggest challenge. We got some small problems configuring the components for pub/sub, that we changed some configuration, that we need to delete the key for Dapper recreated. But that's all.
Okay, this could be, hello? Can you? Okay, so this could be the last question. Oh, Kendall, I'm so sorry.
Only if you want to hear me.
I do, I really do. I truly do. Kendall,
Okay.
tell us, what has been your greatest technical challenge in actually trying to adopt Dapper?
I was like, if I was quiet, maybe I would have gotten away with it. No. So there's honestly a lot of things that I could cover in this section, but a lot of them aren't necessarily Dapper specific. To a certain extent, it's bringing it into a managed service and how you can do that well. One of the challenges when you're working with something like the resource provider, right, is there's the concept of different tracked resources within Azure, and there's references. So you make references to various resources, and you do validation, right? That's kind of the whole objective of the ARM engine itself. A lot of the things in Dapper, though, are happening at runtime. So figuring out, like, for example, in certain circumstances, right, a customer might actually apply a resiliency policy or something else and have scopes on them for apps that don't necessarily exist yet, right? In ARM, this isn't possible if we're going to make it a tracked resource, because we would fail, right? We would fail the creation of one resource because there wasn't an app with that particular app ID. So like figuring out the process to not impede the experience that somebody would get on Kubernetes, where like maybe the dependency graph of Dapper is a little bit less convoluted, while also providing good validation in the beginning that doesn't require you to go till runtime and realize that you spelled secret store wrong. So those are things that I think some of this component failure work and some of the work we're doing to help optimize component creation, specifically within container apps, like ways that we can help auto-generate some of these things will hopefully help, or even just having a list of, for example, Dapper components that are supported, so that if a customer tries to accidentally misspells the type of the component, they're going to get immediate feedback, right? But that's not necessarily something that existed. There wasn't an API that just said, here's everything within this version that's available today, right? So I think that would be an example. I think obviously managing Dapper at scale is still something that there's opportunity to enhance documentation around, right? How do we update Dapper on 5,000 clusters in a secure and like in a secure way, right? How do we rotate the cert when it expires for MTLS, right? These are just things when you're running at scale that good documentation around, or even just guidance. How do we optimize the CPU and memory usage of all of the control plane components? These are things that we've been iterating through and thinking about. But ultimately, I think I'm passionate, and I know Nick is passionate about it as well. How do we find a way to like alleviate the fact that yes, we can have a great platform that manages the Dapper operator and things like that, but that doesn't actually make Dapper usable, right? CADA is different, right? Once the CADA operator is running, you essentially create a config, and all of a sudden your app is going to scale based on CADA. There's no core code required. Whereas in Dapper, the developer has to be intrinsically aware of Dapper and has to be willing to adopt it. And so no matter how good we make the experience in container apps, there's still going to be an adoption entry point that we're also responsible for. And I think figuring out ways that we can make that adoption barrier easier, which I think is through documentation. Personally, for us, I'd love to come up with better like bicep and arm templating, where a customer can easily spin up the majority of Azure Dapper components without having to scaffold them. But yeah, that's just some thoughts inside my brain and probably our team's brain.
Awesome answers. So a few of you guys have already gotten to my next question a little bit, but we're going to dig a little bit more on what you just said, because my next question is going to be on, so what other types of, I guess, like developer problems or distributed application problems do you think that you would like to see Dapper tackling? So for this one, I'm going to start with you, Josh.
So, interesting enough, I think one of the two things that I had most interest in, being selfish, are things that have already started to come up. So I'll mention the two things in flight right now that really kind of answer that question. The first one is pluggable components. My mic skills are so bad. So I would say that the first one is the pluggable components, because I think that for many enterprises, they may want to have their own custom, homegrown, maybe best of breed, maybe highly optimized a component that they, for various reasons, IP, whatever it may be, they don't want to share, or they choose not to share for whatever reason. That's really meaningful for a lot of enterprise. And so I think that's going to unlock a lot of functionality and features where that may also grow into future functionality that can be shared. You know, they get more, an engineer building something for internal might become more comfortable with the Dapper architecture and start contributing on the open source side. So that's the first one. I think the second thing that I have a high degree of interest in is some of the workflow conversations going on right now. Internally, I've been a huge fan of things like durable functions, but we're also internally using Cadence, for example. So there's a lot of different workflow solutions out there. I can definitely see scenarios where there's 3 or 4 different workflow solutions being used by different teams, and we'd like to consolidate those and get a unified API. So those are two kind of upcoming features that were on my radar. I was glad to see community members bringing those up and contributing those ideas, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how those two progress.
Thank you.
Okay, we saw it's not really a big problem itself on Dapper, but it's it's actor characteristic that can be placed on Dapper. That was the mailbox. Okay, for example, Waka give this to Protoactor. If I'm not mistaken, the Orleans give this tool too. It's a great tool when we need to deal with a message sequence. For example, here we have to deal with a really strong message sequence. Okay, we need to give a message for example, for order accepted, order collected, order delivered, and this sequence should be respected. And when we have a lot of consumers for a pub sub, we can lose this sequence in all this process. For example, if I publish a message for order accepted, in the next second I publish this message for order collected. We can lose the sequence of this. Using a mailbox for an actor, we can deal with this problem. At now here, to deal with this, we have some services that are configured to prefetch a single messenger, and the concurrence level is set to single. So we just process a single messenger, and when we are in the rush time, we got a lot of messages in queue to process, and if you use a mailbox, we can solve this problem. At now, what I see, that's the biggest problem in distributed applications that Dapper could be solved.
Okay, this is for you, Kendall. Same thing, you kind of mentioned a little bit about having more documentation and a few ARM templates. Are there any other types of things that you think would make it just make it easier for Dapper to handle some other types of distributed application problems?
So I'm gonna give the PM answer a little bit here and say, like, I don't think you should be asking me this question, mostly because we should be asking this question to the people who are building like distributed applications day in and day out. So like, not you shouldn't be asking me this question, sorry, to be clear. I mean, like, I'm probably not the right person to get this feedback from. It's all of you, right? Where should the future of Dapper go? I think that's what we as PMs, for Dapper and container apps, that's what we're interested in, is solving the problems that you all have shared. I think selfishly from my perspective, I would love a little bit more guidance around like the local development experience. Like, I don't really necessarily think Docker Compose is like the ideal solution. I know there used to be sort of like some insight into how you could run Docker Compose locally and spin up the Dapper containers, because we do still see some customers who aren't necessarily running like K3s on their local machines and spinning up a full Dapper installation. So I think just finding ways to have maybe a better, more basic entry point for development would be compelling. But yeah, in general, I think I'm interested in the question as well, because we're hoping that we can ideally make Dapper better and bring it into container apps.
Awesome. Yeah, I think everything you've mentioned, the Docker Compose, the ARM templates, all those are perfect answers. Yes, please.
I think there is an area you could contribute.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I am now a Dapper Docs
So-
as of now.
No, I do. I think there is an area, because you alluded to a little bit ago. You guys are, when I say you guys, folks are platformizing Dapper. I think, and I'm coming from a platform team, and there's a lot of platform teams out there. So in that regard, you're a user. I would love to see your team's experience making Dapper part of your platform, because there's other teams out there in the wild, my own included, that are going to run into the same challenges and the same things. And I'd love to hear how you solve them for the things you're allowed to share, but also how what the shortcomings are, so that can get fed back in. So I think there is a place where you're the user. I think that would be helpful.
Definitely.
And I'd love to hear that personally.
Yeah, I think today is a good example of us sort of trying to figure out how we can take some of what we're doing and share it more broadly, because we do want to continue to contribute. So I think it's a good point. I feel like as we get more mature as a platform, there's really going to be a need for us to be really transparent about the things that we can contribute back. So totally agree.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think that one of the things that we wanted to do when we created this panel is have people who actually have been using this to consume Dapper in their applications, but also your unique perspective as being an actual platform consumer of Dapper has a slightly different spin on things. So I love this, like, this grouping here. Okay, Carl, what do you think? What are some distributed app problems that you think?
So two fundamental things just to follow on to. Having spent a ton of time in actor model land, I am 100% convinced the implementation of workflow needs to be where the actor model is ultimately. And I know Maxim and those guys would hate me for saying that, but I don't care. But the reality is I think that's that there's a strong argument for you guys to own that workflow integration or have pluggable support for other workflow methods as part of that story as well. And I just wanted to echo that sentiment for sure. Because your basically workflow is what? A description of an abstracted finite state machine, and if you need to dip in and do real work, you can do it. I don't want the opacity that a lot of the other workflow systems offer as part of that story. Two, I think it would be great if we went just farther than lessons learned and came up with some method to describe parametric performance operations of canonical components at scale for everyone who's building platforms at this point. So let's start, in a perfect world, we start to share anonymous statistics to understand overall generalized behavior across releases would be the better way to do this, rather than just kind of telling fireside stories would be the other piece.
You don't want to do that with us? Every release, we just get together?
We can do
and
that
talk
too.
about
Yeah, totally. Absolutely both. But I think that those sorts of scenarios where, you start sharing open benchmarking and being okay with that. I mean, because it's not always going to be in the up direction on the graph. But, I think it would be a great way to get everybody to understand where things are and probably just build more confidence. And transparency. And, it's a great opportunity to step up and do that, in my opinion. The cross-cluster, call scenario for me is probably the most exciting thing I've seen in a long, long time. You got Boris excited, by the way, which is a phenomenally interesting thing. Yeah. That's exactly what he said. Wow. But the point being is that we're all really excited to see where that goes and want to contribute as much as we can, because if we can solve that sort of fundamental transparency, especially if we've got a strong method to decouple and distribute state under that, there's nothing we can't do from that perspective when it comes to really abstracting and extending things quickly here. And that's really exciting. So I just want to I want to upvote basically all those three things right now from that perspective.
Multi-cluster's getting bigger and bigger.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we've jumped from pets to cattle with clusters, especially in the workloads we've got right now. So we're it's like a slaughterhouse basically at this point when it comes down to it. We're creating and destroying a lot of infrastructure and resources on a regular basis, and being able to essentially continue to virtualize on top of that is just a very exciting thing.
Perfect. So as you mentioned, a lot of things you guys mentioned are actually in the works. So we heard your cries, and we're going to go ahead and build a few of these things.
I hope those aren't cries, but yeah.
But so we don't have, I think that was the last question we have time for the panel. We can probably take one more from the audience if anyone has a question, a burning question for the panel. Okay, then I think we are done. You guys are free. You're released from your obligation.